online learning offering, if you will. Whereas in the past, a lot of people did go to St. Croix Central because I think there was maybe a better offering there in years past. So we maybe need to work a little bit more to get ahead of that one. That's
just a couple things on that real quick so everyone understands. Wisconsin Virtual is not even sure if they can serve all the students that will be coming their way. They're struggling finding teachers, and we received notification that we should not plan on over advertising because there's a chance that they will not have a program to offer. They may max out because they have the same limits we do with number of teachers. So we're being a little cautious in saying this is an option for you because it may not be.
Just a heads up, I got a text from Carrie and she said, does Jamie need to help out with technical difficulties? I'm not seeing Carrie is on yet, so she must be having problems.
I'll have Tim reach out to her.
This is your chance, Jamie, to send her a note back and say, it seems to me that you're the one with the technical.
No, actually, she said, does Jamie need to help out with the technical difficulties like I did the other night?
Like usual.
Yeah, just like usual, yeah.
So Bob says that he can hear, but he can't broadcast. He may have to text in his votes. Bob, if you can hear me and you're on the you have it on a computer versus your phone. If you go into just the comment portion, there's Carrie. If you go into the comment portion, you'll be able to put stuff in comments.
Yeah, there's a chat button at the bottom of the screen.
But Ryan might have to turn it on.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't have a chat button either. I got reactions. We could do emojis, but no chat button at the bottom of my screen right now on this Zoom link. I can share a screen, I can record, and it tells me there's 12 participants. But
Bob, maybe you could try the reaction of a thumbs up if you're going to vote yes on something. Can you do that on yours?
All right.
There it is. Okay, so we'll know with Bob's, we'll have the thumbs up piece. All right, so you go ahead, Jamie. You want to call it to order?
Yep, calling the meeting to order. Looking for the first agenda item. Help me out.
The first agenda item, Tim Miner, do you have it up in front of you? I don't even. I think it's it's the
leave protocol.
Leave protocol. Okay, so I shared with you guys, and I will put it up on my. I will share my screen, so you guys can see it as well. Let's see here. There it is, share. Okay, so can everybody see my screen? This is basically the memo that Andrew's putting together. What this memo does is it talks about all the different leaves. Shana went over that, and Andrew has gone over that with you guys. However, really at the end of the day, the direction we're asking from the board, we're going to give you our recommendation, and whether or not you guys are willing to approve it, is when people's leave runs out, there's basically three options. You can extend their leave, you can give them additional paid leave with paid benefits indefinitely or for a period of time. You can expect them to return to work when their leave runs out. And it could potentially cause somebody that if they can't return to work, they're abandoning their post. Or the other option is you could provide unpaid leave with the employee paying the full cost of care, of I'm sorry, not care, of healthcare, like their benefits. The administration's recommendation at this point, and Andrea and I talked about this, and remember she's traveling, is that our default would be when leave runs out, we would expect people to come back to work, and that in extenuating circumstances, we would potentially allow them to take unpaid leave where they would pay their benefits if you had an extenuating circumstance related to it, but we would recommend against extending past the federal guidelines for paid leave as you look at it. And so that is our recommendation as you work through it. So what questions do you have? Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
Okay, Heather, what you spoke up. Yep.
So Nick, can you talk a little bit about the concerns about if we would go with, and this is only about those who qualify for FMLA, right? That's what we're talking about. So they have or the EFMLA. So this is there is either a childcare or a medical reason that they would be securing leave, not I'm just not feeling comfortable coming back.
Yeah, I mean, so the people that don't have a qualifying leave event. So this is really what it is this is for people that have already qualified for leave and under the federal guidelines after their leave runs out, what the expectation would be. We're trying to hold firm on the fact that if you don't qualify for federal leave, we would expect you to be at work.
Got it. Okay. So talk a bit about what the challenge is with in any case, if we said, okay, well, if you qualified for leave and it runs out, we would give you a leave, an extended leave without pay and without benefits. Are the challenges there a concern that we aren't going to have enough instructors, or what would get in the way of us recommending that?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, if we basically what happens is once you essentially you're allowing them to take additional leave unpaid, they're paying the benefits. However, it puts that position in limbo, until that leave is over. So it means you can't try to hire for that position. It means that you could be indefinitely sitting on a long-term sub, and it creates some real staffing challenges for us. Now, there may be situations where, it might be like a 2-week period or a 3-week period. Somebody might be recovering from something medically or something along those lines. But, really, the thought process behind this is because the leave can be intermittent, we're allowing it to be intermittent as an employer, that, we're trying to be as flexible as possible. But there comes a point where our number one priority has to be educating the kids in our buildings and staffing our buildings in order to do that. And it's not just if we're face to face, it's also virtual options too. I mean, so when people are out on leaves, they are not working for us.
Mr. President.
Yes,
Bruce was up.
Oh, Bruce, yeah, Bruce had his hand up first. Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Sorry, Rob. Just real quick. So, on the additional 3 days, that was, I think suggested the other night, maybe another district is doing it. To me, these are unprecedented times. 3 days, someone gets, COVID, they're out, right? So they use everything up essentially, or much of it, and then they're onto their sick pay. Would we be able to model that out to see if we did provide 3 additional days, like what sort of incremental cost that would be to the district?
It's almost impossible to model out because we don't know how many people it's going to impact, because like you said, it's never happened before.
So let's, could we model out to say 25% of the people take it, 50% of the people take it? Because I don't think everyone's going to take advantage of it, because that means they have to burn through everything, right? Before they would even use it. And it wouldn't be something that would carry over. I think it would be, during the pandemic timeframe. I'm just curious. I'm not suggesting we go down that path. I'm with you. Our number one priority does need to be educating kids. We can't just be, going off the grid here and allowing everyone to kind of say, well, I'm not comfortable. I still want to get paid. I think we need to have our guidelines set. I think they need to be consistent with FML lines. I don't think that that's putting our staff in any undue harm that nurses want to endure, or other essential employees that need to be available to keep our economy and our future growing.
Okay, Rob, you had a point?
Just a quick question. Have we, and I know the turnaround was fairly quick, but have we had a chance to talk with any of the staff that might be impacted by this as far as what they think? Just curious.
Yeah, we've talked with a lot of staff, and we've done staff surveys, and Andrea's team has been reaching out, and principal teams have been calling and working through this. I mean, it's really, it's all over the board. I mean, we have some people say, okay, I understand, I will be at work. We have some people that say, well, then I might just have to quit. We have some people that say, you know, I think I'll get these things figured out. I mean, a couple of things people have to understand is, if you are unable to come to work because you are sick with COVID and you have sick leave left, it is like, and the doctor hasn't released you to come back to work, you would use your normal sick leave. Okay, so you know, that's the 10 COVID days are related to, it doesn't take from your sick leave at all if you have to, you know, if you have to quarantine or things like that, the first 10 sick days. So let's say you have to quarantine, we're required by law to pay people for those 10 days, not deduct it from their sick leave, and then they, you know, come back to work. Now let's say they quarantine, the first 10 days are no deduction of sick leave. And then let's say on day 12 they get, you know, a positive test and they have to be home because they're sick. Well, then they would take their normal sick leave that they would have available to them. Just like if somebody came down with influenza, or somebody, you know, had to have back surgery or things like that. And similar to what we've done with people in the past is, once they run out of their paid sick leave, they go into non-paid status as we kind of work through this. I mean, the biggest piece, you know, as it relates to COVID happens to do with childcare. So if you have staff members that are, you know, wanting to take intermittent leave, so 2 days a week, they want to be able to be home with their kids and take EFMLA leave. That could mean that up to 24 weeks of the school year, our kids could be without their regular classroom teacher half the time. And then if you add additional time onto that, I mean, you could essentially be almost to the entire school year. And depending on if we have to go to a hybrid model, and when that staff member's taking off versus when kids are in the buildings, I mean, you could have groups of kids that don't have the regular teacher in front of them face to face for a long time. And so I think those are things you have to consider. I understand people want to be good employers, and we do. However, we cannot lose sight of the fact our number one job is to educate the children of our district. Yes, we want to take care of our staff, but our number one job is to educate the children of our district.
Heather?
Nick, do we know how health systems have navigated this? I mean, there's a similar scenario, right, where they want to take care of their employees and they need staff there to care for patients. Do we have a sense for where they landed on this?
At least to some of the healthcare providers that I've talked to, they find this to be an interesting conversation because they were just expected to come to work. And when you're listed as a tier 1 employee, for example, a tier 1 essential employee, what that means is no longer are you considered a close contact. So if you get called as a close contact and normally would have to, distance for or quarantine for 40 days, that no longer goes into effect. You're back at work. And so some people want to say, well, what if we clarify, you know, what if we classify certain employees as tier 1 essentials? It's kind of like, well, I mean, you know, that's one of the downsides of it. So you have those folks in healthcare because obviously they're close contacts to people with COVID all the time. They can't be quarantining all the time. And so they're just expected to continue to come to work.
Nick, just clarifying question. So to get those extra 10 COVID days, if you will, they don't have to actually have a positive test. They
Nope.
could be just having COVID-like symptoms or even no symptoms, but yet have to be quarantined because public health is saying they're quarantined, correct?
Correct.
So if we're giving them 10 days for even COVID exposure without even requiring that they have symptoms, and on top of the 10 COVID days, they still keep their 12 other medical leave days. And if someone were to be quarantined multiple times, the HR department has the ability to grant additional COVID days, if you will, correct?
you know, if it's related, yeah, I mean, if they're not allowed to come to work, essentially what would happen is they would utilize their sick leave. If
Right, but let's say they burn through their sick leave. I mean, it's just, now we're talking extreme situations. I
and
understand.
I think
That'd
you just got to be
22 days.
careful. Yeah, I mean, I think you got to be careful of trying to make rules because of the one or two extreme situations that we may have. And I think that's part of the problems that we're running into across the board as it relates to COVID is people are playing to these extreme situations and then trying to make that apply to everyone. And in reality, that's not typically how we operate. And so, you know, if we have a situation where we've already talked about if teachers have to quarantine and they're able to deliver their instruction remotely, we wouldn't even count those as leave days.
Right.
You know, so we would, I mean, they wouldn't even, it wouldn't even be going against their leave. And so this is really, you know, after we've already paid somebody to be off with their kid, you know, think about the child care or taking care of somebody. We've already paid for 12 weeks worth of time off.
Plus
Now
we
you're
pay a
talking about
substitute. Then we have to pay a substitute during those 12 weeks. Right.
Potentially, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
On top of that cost.
Right.
Here, go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, so Nick, I mean, my hope and assumption is that these cases won't primarily be about repeated illnesses with COVID and family members with COVID. That, I mean, it seems like we're probably more likely talking about issues of staff who live in other districts, have kids who are in, you know, across the border on an intermittent schedule and are feeling like they need to, because they have young kids, be home while their kids are learning remotely, and or if we go to remote. I mean, is that more likely the situation that it would be related to?
It is more likely, and it kind of feeds into the second topic today, which is the rates if we provide childcare. And, you know, our proposal is to provide childcare even for out-of-district employees as soon as day one. I mean, so that we can have them in our buildings teaching and doing that. Now, I will tell you, we can provide that childcare. They're not required to take it. They could still take their EFMLA leave. I mean, we can't say, well, because we're providing childcare, you have to come to work and not take that leave. So, you know, we think that that's why we're trying to provide those options for people. And then if they're still not taking advantage of them, there comes to a point where it's like, okay, we don't have an endless supply of money.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. I mean, we just don't. And I don't know of many other employers that are saying, I'm just basically going to allow you to stay on leave completely paid indefinitely. I've yet to hear that.
No, they're not doing that.
Yeah.
And to your other point, Heather, on healthcare workers, I mean, my wife's a nurse. You know, she's living this every day, and you know, even having people come in to ask questions like, hey, I don't want to go to work if I'm pregnant. You know, nurses have to go into work if they're pregnant. You know, I mean, people need to go into work under normal circumstances here. So I think we're all working through this. You know, schools, if they're not deemed essential, I don't know what is. You know, getting kids educated is absolutely essential. And, you know, just like every other company, individual that wants to make a living and earn money, they need to go to work and they need to do their job. And I think that's really what we're talking about here. And I think it's pretty clear that's my opinion.
Carrie, did you have something? I saw your hand go up.
Nick actually answered it. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
So like I said, just to recap, our recommendation is that when their leave runs out, that we would, our step one would default to, we expect you to come back to work. And then if there's an extenuating circumstance, HR would then look at that. Like, for example, you know, they are caring for somebody that is, you know, maybe has cancer. Maybe their spouse is, you know, stage 2, stage 3, stage 1, stage 4 cancer. And so we would say, okay, we would allow you extended leave, but it would be unpaid. And, basically what we're saying is you'd have rights to your job back, and you'd have to pay for your own insurance during that time. And those, they would be extenuating. I mean, they'd have to be a pretty extenuating circumstance. And we know as of right now, as Bruce said, I don't want to come to work because I'm pregnant, or I don't want to come to work because I'm scared, or I don't want to come to work because I have asthma, is not considered, according to the health guidelines and the federal legislation, as reasons not to come to work in COVID. Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the administration's recommendation.
Okay, there's a motion. Second by Rob. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor by signifying aye or a thumbs up on your emoji screen. Aye.
Aye.
All right. I have, the ayes have it. I didn't see any nays. Not seeing any nays, the motion passes. And now we're moving on to the daycare situation. What is the recommendation?
So the recommendation, when we originally approached staff about providing daycare so that they could be at work, the original cost we looked at was about $30, about $31 a day, $32 a day. And what we have been charging everybody to this point, that's paramedics, nurses, and every other parent that has run our school program. That's what we've been charging a day. And so what I just want to make sure is, if we look at it, and we've had staff push back and say that's just too much money, I'm going to have to take my leave, because if I have 2 kids at home, that's going to be $60 a day, $300 a week. That's, depending on how many days a week. And so I'm just going to have to take my leave. So we started to look at this and say, okay, what is our cost? So as you can see on this spreadsheet, and I can try to make it a little bit bigger, if we look at our staffing ratios, and we're basing everything on staffing ratios, we're basically saying $32 a day per kid is what our cost is. You can look at, $21 is our hourly rate with benefits and stuff like that for our caregivers. If we look at weeks of care, if we look at, we're just thinking about the people that live in Minnesota and they're starting virtual to start 3 days a week. Average kids per household for a staff member needing it, we're saying 3. And then we put in, our new sub rate that was approved the other night was $200 plus FICA and WRS, which is, comes to $230. So with that being said, if we had 25 staff request this, and we said it's going to be free, we're not going to charge anybody, the cost to the district would be about $259,000. If we had 50 staff members request this is at 3 days a week for the year, it'd be about $518,000. Okay, and those are pretty big numbers. However, there is some offset where if all of those people then worked instead of taking the leave, you can see what our sub cost would be. So it is financially better for us to pay some amount of childcare, what we think is reasonable, than to have them take the leave and have us find subs. Now, understand that we would, there are some positions that don't require subs. If you have a counselor, for example, or certain other certified staff positions, or even support staff positions don't require subs. However, as we've kind of talked, I do believe it would be important for staff to have some level of contribution to childcare. And what we're looking at is a recommendation that it would be $10 a day for staff versus the district per child, and the district would supplement the other $22 a day per child, because it would help our costs. But the thing we want to be careful of is we do have people that already have things lined up and they're not needing it. But now all of a sudden, if it's going to be free through the district, now all of a sudden are we taking on an additional burden of folks that originally wouldn't have used it had they paid for it.
Okay, Rob?
Go ahead, Rob.
And so are we opening this up to teachers, or is this all staff? What are your thoughts?
I guess to me, I would say that this would be an all staff, all employee essentially recommendation. I think I get a little concerned, quite honest with you, because we've had staff being expected to be at work for the last 3 months and we haven't offered any type of discounted childcare. The biggest reason we're doing this is to keep our buildings open.
Okay, Bruce?
I would agree with the all staff if we're going to do this. You know, $10, it's I guess not even 33% of the cost that it would normally be. Maybe how do we come to that versus like 50%, you know? So just kind of curious. And then is this just a 1-year plan? Because what I want to be also careful of is that we're not now then saying, okay, from here to 4, this will be, you know, something that will be a benefit. This is really something that we're doing to ensure during this pandemic we're getting, you know, as much staff in place as we can.
Well,
So
we could word the motion just so that it's effective during a state of emergency, correct?
well, yeah, I mean, here's a couple things, kind of caveats to go with it. One, yes, it would be just for this school year, and then if you guys, we have it sunset, and then if you guys wanted to extend it, we would talk about it again next summer if we're still not through this situation with COVID. 2, this would only apply to the hours that would be the staff member would be normally working. So for example, this would be like an 8-hour block of time. This would not be, you could have from 6 in the morning till 6:30 at night, or 6 in the morning, 6 at night, childcare. So if you already need wraparound care, you still have to pay for that. Okay, this is for if the regular day, during the regular work day, the 8-hour regular work day, we're saying that we would provide childcare, you know, we'd recommend we provide it at $10 per kid, and the district would eat the other 20. Is there some magic number to that 10? No, I mean, it could be 11.50, it could be 16, it could be 15. We wanted to have it be low enough that people aren't like, oh my gosh, you know, I still don't want to do it. But also you want to have it so that there is at least some level of contribution by staff, because we've been having everybody else contribute up to this point. Go ahead,
Rob,
Rob.
I saw your hand.
Yeah, 2 quick questions. One, did Tim find out whether or not we'd be able to allow teachers to adjust their cafeteria plans?
He has not found out that yet. We have not heard back from that if we can make that adjustment. He believed, when I had talked to him earlier, that he didn't believe we were going to be able to do that. The biggest guidance that the federal government has given us is allowed people to spend beyond the normal plan year, not necessarily change the elections.
You know, and certainly this is an unforeseen cost potentially for our staff. So I think even though we've not offered this, you know, earlier, you know, this continues to be a very fluid situation. And I do think that, you know, any benefit, any help for our staff is appreciated by them. And so do we have, is this only in a hybrid situation where this is a synchronous, you know, where we have synchronous learning, or is this going to start immediately? What does administration think?
No, this would be once school starts. Once, you know, basically once school starts for us. That's when we're thinking.
So regardless of whether we're 100% in session or,
well, and you gotta remember, this would only be for children aged kindergarten through 5th grade. So this isn't like, hey, I have a 2-year-old at home and now I'm going to drop them off here, because we don't provide that type of care now. And so, yeah, I mean, this is school age, and it would be for basically starting our first day, September 1st.
Heather.
Go ahead, Heather.
So Nick, thanks for the clarification. I think that was important to remind people. I mean, this wouldn't be a permanent benefit because hopefully kids aren't going to permanently need care during the school day. Like at some point we'll get back. I'm not as concerned about it being something new that we haven't offered over the summer because staff are used to paying for care for their kids during the summer. I think it's that unexpected expense that we're trying to address with this. I support the recommendation of significantly reducing the staff cost. I would also support a family cap. You know, if we would say it's going to be basically, you know, 10 bucks a day, 50 bucks a week, up to $100 per family. I mean, I think that there might be some families, if you've got 4 school-age kids, all of a sudden that turns into $800 a month. So that even at the reduced rate, it's a lot. Is that something that you've discussed?
Yeah, we have discussed it. I mean, it's going to be to what level of comfort does the board have in subsidizing? You know, I think financially, you know, it's obviously better for us to financially better for us to have to subsidize this than it is to pay for the stuff. I mean, we're in a better financial position as it relates to that. But yeah, if you wanted to cap it, if you want to say it was $10 a day per kid at no more than $100 per week per family or something like that, because you have to remember some of these only need 2 days a week. Some of them need 3 days. Some of them are going to need all 5 if we have to go virtual or their schools have to go all virtual. Go ahead, Carrie.
I was going to make the same point that Heather did. Also, in the case of a closure, if we didn't require synchronous learning, some teachers wouldn't need care if they're allowed to record lessons. Would that be considered?
Yeah, I mean, right now our plan is synchronous learning. And if it's not working well and we need to punt and we need to redo, we absolutely will be flexible and fluid with that. However, we are finding part of the reason why the synchronous came up is we were finding that teachers were recording lessons. It was taking them hours to record a 45-minute lesson because they were constantly re-recording to get it right. Whereas when you're synchronous, if you misspeak or you say something, you kind of motor on through, type of thing. And so,
and they may be more comfortable with it now, just having done it for several weeks in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, as of right now, our plan would still be to be synchronous to start. And then if for some reason we're not able to do those things, we can always make an adjustment. But right now we've been holding the line that we are not. And again, it's as Dave explained on Monday night, it's not synchronous for 7 hours. I mean, there's blocks of time. And so right now we don't have interest in changing the direction we're heading as of right now. However, that could change within a few weeks of school starting. I mean, just kind of seeing what happens.
All right, Rob, his hand up and then Bruce.
So does it make sense for us to only offer this outside of being 100% in class? It sounds as if we're 100% in class, this offer, if you will, wouldn't necessarily be needed. What do you think?
Well, it's because we have teachers that live outside of our district, and we are 100% in class, and their schools have chosen to not be 100% in class. We would want to provide that option starting day one. Like we know for a fact, I think that White Bear is going K-12 in a hybrid. And so we have teachers that live there. So we're face-to-face and their kids aren't there. So we would allow them, and we would cohort those kids. We would allow them to bring their kids from White Bear over to, and we would provide that childcare. That's why it would start right away. Even if we're,
and I know Bruce has got his hand up, but I want to bootstrap what Rob just asked about, this effect, because there's a differentiation between staff that live outside the district. It's going to potentially affect them more because we only have control over whether we open our schools or not. Plus, our staff that choose to live in the district are paying taxes that are being used to subsidize this, while staff that live outside the district do not. And so did we look at a recommendation where staff that are in the district, having them pay 10 per kid, and maybe people who live outside the district have 15, let's say? It's still being subsidized, but just not to the same degree.
So couple of comments.
Go ahead,
you know,
please.
Thank you for sharing the data on the numbers, because it's helpful to see the offset that's there as well with having to pay subs. You know, just kind of thinking about it, you know, where I was in my head was around 50% of the cost. So that would maybe be what, $16 a day. That's kind of where I was at, just speaking frankly. So the other comment, I do think synchronous learning is better. If we are 100% virtual, can teachers bring kids into their classrooms while they're doing synchronous learning so that they may not need to use that? Or did you guys discuss that? Are there thoughts?
Yeah.
Is it cap?
So we're working with Shayna. She's been working with a couple other districts to create what's called kind of employee expectations when we're working from home or working in classrooms. And some of that is addressed in there. And there's,
Okay.
you know, it's part of the challenges, for example, would be, you know, if you're in a classroom and you're delivering your regular instruction, your kid can sit in the back corner and do their thing, it's not as big of an issue. But, you know, as Dave pointed out, there might only be 3 or 4 hours of that during the day. And then, you know, in the afternoon or at a different time, it may be an IEP meeting that you might have to Zoom into. And what we cannot have is the teacher's kids sitting in the classroom while they're Zoomed into an IEP meeting. So even like part of the expectations would be, even if they're working remotely from home, is if they're in, they have to maintain the confidentiality piece. I mean, there's that regardless of where they're located. So that's where it creates some issues where if you bring them to work and we have different meetings or different things we're expecting of you, because understand that we won't probably shut down again like we did this spring where we said all employees are at home. I mean, if we go 100% virtual, we will probably still expect our office staff to report to work on a daily basis. You know, we'll be, you know, administrators will be reporting to work on a daily basis. And so, you know, there may be things where they're still having face-to-face meetings. And then we start to run into some challenges as if I have to bring this teacher, you know, we're going to have a meeting in a conference room, socially distanced, and I need to bring this teacher down to the meeting. And now they have their kids at work. Who's supervising their kids? Now we have kids in the building that aren't being supervised. That's one of the challenges that we have, and it creates liability issues. Not saying we can't overcome that, and not saying we're not opposed to it, but it's just those are some of the challenges that we have. And it would be the same thing at home, except we don't bear that burden of supervision liability for the kids when they're at home as we would when they come to school. So absolutely, we could definitely look at it, but before we would, you know, put out that this is what our expectations are as a district when working remotely or working, you know, these things, you know, we'll run it by the board. Hopefully we'd have it ready for the 24th board meeting so you guys would see it and be able to give feedback before we, you know, before we move any further on that. But that's a pretty strong point that Shayna makes related to confidentiality and having kids within close proximity of what you're doing.
Okay.
All
Rob,
good points. Thank you for those.
Yep.
So if we're 100% in class or hybrid and we have, say, an extra 25 or 50 kids during the day, do we have an idea where we're going to put them?
We've already done those. We've already done those numbers. Dave has worked with the principals to determine where we could potentially have some empty classrooms, or, you know, potentially things that maybe were nice to have room space, you know, like we utilize those spaces, but it's more because we have them and it's nice to have, but we could definitely free up that space. And so we do have spaces designated in the different buildings, but understand it wouldn't necessarily be that, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be that certain kids stay in the same building. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, they'll be cohorted based on where we have space. And then once they're cohorted in that spot, that's where they go every day whenever they are coming.
okay.
Carrie?
Heather?
Oh, Heather?
Go ahead, Heather.
Nick, to clarify, I mean, we keep saying childcare, but the assumption is that if these kids are engaged in remote learning, there would be some staff supervision for that remote learning. I mean, it's kind of more than just childcare. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the expectation and what would happen is we would set them up and Tracy would be working with the staff to basically say, you know, they're doing their synchronous instruction during that time. And they're socially distanced and they're on our, you know, we have good connections for them. They're on our Wi-Fi or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean,
And that is indeed what we did with kids from March until the end of the school year. So we did provide time for kids each day. Now that was different, but we did make sure that kids had time each day to do their school work.
Got it.
And supported them, helping them get on their computers and helping them if they had questions.
Got it. Well, I would be ready to move ahead with a motion, and feel free to discuss more after, but I would move that we accept the recommendation that we provide subsidized care at the rate of $10 a day with a cap per family of $100 per week.
And just, you phrase the motion such that the subsidy would be $10 a day. You mean subsidized and the cost to the teacher would be $10 per student?
Yep, sorry,
day.
I thought I said the rate, so that the rate would be $10 per day. Yep, that was the intention.
Right. And Carrie, well, I need a second before we can discuss it further now, now that we got a motion.
Second.
Anyone want to second the motion? Otherwise it dies for fail of second. Okay, Rob second. All right, now we can discuss. Carrie?
Well, I was going to say, I guess I would amend that, or would like to amend that. Jamie, I appreciated your point regarding teachers who teach out of district, that the taxes is different. So I would say maybe $15 a day or $30 a day for the family, and not do the weekly cap, but do a daily cap, because some, as you said, Nick, some families will only need 2 days a week of care. And if those are out of district families or in district, so it would be, 40 for that week or 60 for that week, depending on whether they're our residents or Minnesota.
and just real quick, I don't know if we can legally do that. I mean, I'll have to, Shana hasn't gotten back to me on that. I mean, if we can legally, I mean, we may be able to, I don't know if we can, give 2 different rates based on where you live.
Well, and to me, it seems a bit divisive in that we don't do that with other benefits. And you could make the same argument for all of the other benefits that we provide for employees, that it's residents who are paying for them, but we don't charge out of district employees more for their health insurance or more for, I guess I would look to Nick. Well, do you think that would be, how do you think that would be received by staff? Would that be received as divisive, or would that be reasonable?
That's quite the loaded question. You should be on my weekly Zoom meetings with staff. So I guess, do I think there's reason to it? Do I think it's reasonable? Yes. Do I think it would cause people to be a little bit upset? Yes. Do I think we can do it? I don't know. It may be a little bit of a clerical nightmare as far as trying to track all of that and work through that. The daily rate, whether you cap it at per day or you cap it, per week, you guys can decide however you want to do it. It's what do you think is, I think what you would want to do if you're going to cap it is, what do you think is reasonable for people to have to pay? And compared to, and again, you have to also think about the people that are paying for this, the taxpayers that are paying for this, what have they had to do in their professions and their jobs and things like that, because they are the ones ultimately flipping the bill on this thing. So you have to kind of balance that. In my opinion, you have to balance that. So, although yes, we want to provide it, and in my mind, the reason we provide the discounted rate is because overall it's financially a better situation for the district, which could put us in a better spot if we have big cuts coming down the road with funding. But Bruce, go ahead.
Wait, before Bruce, I wanted to be able to respond to Heather. She asked the question of you and I let you respond to the question, but wanted to point out your thing about you could make that argument about all benefits. No, you can't, because The other benefits are not dependent on, this is about childcare and other school districts closing down their schools and requiring their students to be at home. So that's something that we don't have control over. And that's why I would treat that differently. It's more likely to be used, I guess, by out of district teachers. And, that's why I was talking about it. As far as a rate, I don't have a position on whether it's per day or per week necessarily, but I think $100 a week sounds reasonable. And then because you have some situations where families are only going to use it for 2 days a week, but if they have 4 kids, they're going to hit their cap sooner. If we just make it a straight cap, regardless of number of children on a weekly basis, then parents can decide, I guess, how they're going to structure the daycare, and they're more likely to use it. I want to actually have an incentive where they do use it, because we want that rather than us having to pay for a sub. Bruce?
So on the current, I guess, proposal, I would say no. I'm very supportive of subsidizing. I'm at 50%. And I'm also okay with the $100 a week cap. But as the motion currently sits, I'm not going to go for it. I'm just stating that, and but yet I'm comfortable at 50%. And what is it, $32 or is it 30, Nick? Is that $15?
It's $32, I think, when we got it all put together. And I think the thing also people have to remember, so we have that offset sub cost, but do you understand we don't have any offset sub cost if we go 100% virtual? I mean, more than likely. I mean, if they're able to work from home and they don't take that leave, we start to lose that offset sub cost. So it's just, now somebody could argue that, well, even if they're 100% virtual, they could take the leave because they don't feel like they could provide the instruction and watch their kids. So by having this option, that would save us money, but more than likely, if they took the leave, we wouldn't be hiring a sub to deliver for those days that they took the leave. We would probably be combining things at that point. So it's just something to keep in mind as you look at it.
Well, as I understand, we have the motion on the floor is just $10 regardless of residency, with a cap of $100 a week, regardless of number of children or number of days utilized. So that's my understanding that the current motion, we've had suggestions for possibly changing it, either the cap, make it a daily, or different charging of whether resident or non-resident. But is there any further proposed amendment? And if there's a motion for an amendment, we could take it on. It needs a second and a debate, and then go back to the original. Or are people fine with going ahead with the motion as is?
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine as well.
Okay. All right. Okay, then is there any further discussion then? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye or a thumbs up.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And Bob, do you have a thumbs up or a thumbs down? I didn't.
Bob is a vote no, leaning with Bruce, is what he said.
Okay. All right. So I guess the ayes have it and the motion has been approved. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are adjourned, and thank you for hosting the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.